Hello friends, welcome to yet another session on SF Perspectives. The topic for today is visionary decision making happens at the intersection of intuition and logic. As always, I have a personal appeal friends. Third edition of my book Ethics, Integrity and Aptitude has unfortunately been pirated. Pirated copies are of very low paper and print quality. I urge all of you to buy original. Thank you. Friends, this essay should be conceptualized as being made of various components and subcomponents. First we would introduce the essay, then we would develop upon the essence of the topic, then we would discuss as to how intuition helps, how logic helps in decision making. Then we would discuss as to what would happen, what are the pitfalls of basing our decisions on intuition without logic and basing our decisions on logic without intuition. Then we would discuss about as to the synergy between intuition and logic. Then we would get into the critical aspect of it, and we would question whether intuition and logic are enough or do we need anything else. Then we would conclude. Friends, I feel the best way to start this essay is by again referring to the sequence from the movie Chak De India. So you may be wondering that I am a big fan of Chak De India movie, so I keep referring to this movie in my essay examples. Yes, I indeed am. Okay, that aside, so friends, at the climax of this movie Chak De India, when the last penalty strike has to be stopped by India, so the coach Kabir Khan actually analyzes how the Australian penalty striker would hit the ball, whether she would take right or she would hit it right, she would hit it left, or she would hit it straight. See friends, how is the decision making happening? See, he would first observe as to how the hockey stick is, and then he would observe how her feet is. Since her hockey stick is turned to the left, then Kabir Khan thinks that she would hit it left. Then he observes her feet. Since her feet is actually turned towards right, then he thinks she would hit it right. But see, these two are logical aspects, right? See, hockey stick turning to the left would mean logically the player would hit it to the left. The feet turning to the right would mean the player would hit it to the right. See, these are two logics on the basis of which he initially thinks, but later from his intuition, okay, see, because if his decision were to be based solely on logic, then there are 50-50 chances. She would either hit it to the left, or she would either hit it to the right. Correct? So that is a logical decision. But since after observing these two, then he, out of his own experience, his intuition says that she would hit it straight. Because thus that decision of Kabir Khan that the goalkeeper has to stand wherever she is so that she can save one goal actually happens because of intersection of logic and intuition. The logic is that since hockey stick is turning to one side and feet is turning to the other side, so you cannot conclusively say that she would hit to a particular side. Correct? So thus that means there are 50-50 chances. So then his intuition says then she would neither hit it that way nor hit it the other way, then she would hit it straight. So thus this decision was the best example for how visionary decision making can happen at the intersection of logic and intuition. In this essay, let us seek to explore as to how these two important factors contribute to visionary decision making. Friends, first we need to identify the three key terms in this essay statement. The first one is vision, the second visionary decision making, second one is intuition, and the third one is logic. Okay, so first we will try to explore the meaning of intuition and then logic and then visionary decision making. Then we will try to bring together the meaning of all the three terms so that the entire essence of the statement can be made. So the first one is intuition. Friends, what is intuition? Intuition is basically a sixth sense, friends. As all of us are aware, intuition is an instinctive is whatever strikes to one's mind immediately without deliberate contemplation or without deliberate thinking. So the moment you hear something, you come up with an opinion or you get some feeling. That feeling is what we call intuition. If you start thinking, contemplating, analyzing and then arriving at an opinion or a feeling, then it is not an intuition. So intuition is basically subconscious feeling that one gets as soon as he sees something, thinks something or hears about something, that's it. So it is basically the instant feeling that anyone would get. So that is intuition. The source of this instant feeling actually lies in one's personality, one's previous experiences, one's knowledge, one's reading, etc. etc. Correct, right? The moment you see something, you come up with an opinion or you get a feeling is basically is the result of your past experiences and how your personality is. Correct. So as soon as this is nothing but a subset of attitude basically. So thus intuition is the function of all these things. Actually, a person who is a coward would actually get one feeling. A person who is courageous would get an altogether different feeling. So a person who is ignorant about an issue would come up with one feeling. A person who is well versed with the subject would actually get another feeling. So thus this intuition is that instant feeling, which in turn is the function of one's personality, one's experiences, one's knowledge, etc. 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 Okay, now let us come to the second term, that is logic. So logic is basically scientific problem solving. Correct, friends? So it is basically, there are established principles in logic. So accordingly, if A happens, it would lead to B. If C happens, it would lead to D. That is what logic is all about. So logic is basically cause effect relationship or input output relationship. You can take it either ways. So it is an established way of things, established scientific principles based on which one would arrive at a decision. Correct? So that means if you drive fast, you cannot control your vehicle, then you will meet with an accident. That is logic. Correct? So basically logic is a deliberate attempt. Unlike intuition, logic is a deliberate attempt. So under intuition, the moment you hear of something, you get that instant feeling. That may or may not be tested, that may or may not be scientifically proven. But in the logic, actually every independent variable is fed into the logical function, and that would churn out an expected dependent variable. So that is what logic is all about. Basically intuition is an instant feeling. Logic is deliberate attempt using scientific methods, scientific principles to arrive at a decision. Correct? So thus these are actually opposite to each other. Then let us talk about visionary decision making. Friends, how is decision making different from visionary decision making? Decision making essentially means choosing, right? So you have to make choices. But visionary decision making has an additional twist to it. Visionary decision making happens if you choose that choice that will define the future, that will change the trajectory of future. Then that decision is what we call visionary decision making. Okay, so it is not any routine decision making. So the decision that you take has huge ramifications for future. You have the ability to look into the future. You have the ability to go beyond obvious and come up with some decisions that would actually bring huge benefits to the future. So such decision making is what we call visionary decision making. Now let us put all these three things together, friends. So this statement essentially means if you have to make decision that has that defines future, then that decision should be based both on intuition and logic. Correct? So let me rephrase this. Future defining decisions have to be necessarily based on both instant feelings and scientifically established procedures, is what the statement is trying to convey. Correct? So now this essay will try to explore how would this instant feelings contribute to such future defining decisions, how would logic contribute to such future defining decisions, how would bringing together both intuition and logic would lead to future defining decisions, and what would happen, and then whether having both these things enough to make decisions that define future. Correct? Let's move on, friends. After setting tone for this essay, now it is important for us to dwell deeply upon how intuition helps in decision making. See, the first and foremost thing is that intuition gives lot of practical sense. Logic is essentially a theoretical exercise. Correct? Most of the times the logical conclusions that are derived from theoretical studies would not have may not have absolute practical sense fed into them, because this practical sense comes only when a person observes happenings and then developing opinion around the same. Let me illustrate this way. Friends, actually the theory says in order to wean away a person from smoking, you have to expose him to the gravest gruesome images of the damage afflicted to lungs because of smoking. Correct? So the logically a person once is made to see the gruesome damage afflicted to the lungs because of smoking, he would quit smoking. This is the logic. But actually what intuition would say, a person, if he is exposed to a very horrific picture, then he would actually get tensed. He would, rather than staying away from smoking, he would prefer staying away from that picture that he is exposed to. So this practical sense comes only by intuition. Only when a person mingles with other individuals, then only he would understand as to how people think, and then he can make the right decision. A person who sits within the four walls cannot come up with this practical sense as to how things can be used. The second merit associated with intuition is that intuition actually is based on intuition has the benefit of hindsight. By hindsight I actually mean intuition is rooted in experiences, right? A person gets an instinctive feeling about something only if he or she has encountered or undergone similar circumstances in the past. So thus once a person has met with a failure or has encountered a problem in the past, would actually be conscious, and that experience gets fed into a person's subconscious mind, and then he would be able to that information, that benefit of hindsight knowledge comes out as intuition. Since intuition, I mean, surprisingly, the intuition is rooted in others' experiences also. Because since intuition is part of, is function of one's personality, a person's personality opinions are often molded by the experiences here, I mean, heard from others also. Correct. So sometimes while taking a decision, you would suddenly, remember that someone else had encountered a similar situation and he dealt with that situation in that appropriate way. So that actually helps, that actually powers your intuition, and that would actually drive your decision making actually. So we hear from our parents, grandparents, teachers, friends, etc., etc. So many times their experiences also unknowingly become part of our personality, unknowingly become part of our intuition. Friends, most of the time logic convinces the status quo, but it is only intuition that forces a person to challenge the status quo and then go ahead. Because if a person roots his decision, bases his decision exclusively on logic, he most of the times meets a dead end. But if sometimes his heart says there is something beyond that, then if he tries, he will explore, he will get the gold. So for example, take the case of Arunachalam Muruganathan, I mean the padman of India. See, when everybody mocked at him, everybody thought being an illiterate, he would not be able to come up with low cost sanitary pad making machines. Logically, an illiterate person cannot come up with some solutions like that, correct? But and everybody told him that he was actually running mad, he was trying something which is impossible. But what was that one thing that kept on pushing him, despite his wife deserting him, despite his village boycotting him? It was one and only one thing, that is his intuition. Yes, you can do, you please go ahead. Correct. So thus so many decisions, I mean in most of the cases when logic is the limiting factor, it is the intuition that actually challenges that logic and powers an individual to challenge that status quo and run beyond that. Correct. And the another way intuition helps is, it helps in reading opponent's mind. Whenever let us take the case of business. Actually in the business, actually it is important for us to run fast, but at the same time it is important for us to also understand how our competitor is running. Correct. So this is basically a case of trying to outperform the competitor. So this outperforming competitor is possible only when we are able to understand the mindset of the opponent. So that ability to understand the mindset of opponent comes only by experience. See, once actually a person, a businessman would have learnt, would have had the experience of how his competitors behave or respond to every particular situation. So that actually helps a person, a businessman, to come up with some strategy that would actually outperform the responses of the competitors. Then so that's how it is important. Actually all these things actually doesn't happen with logic. All these things happen only with intuition, necessarily with intuition. Then after getting ourselves convinced that intuition is an extremely important factor in visionary decision making, now it is time for analyzing as to how logic helps. Correct. See, the mere fact that intuition helps doesn't mean that logic has no value, right? Logic also helps. See, the first and foremost important character of the logic is that it establishes causality. Logic helps us establishes causes. So thus in every person, if you have come up with some if you have come up with some situation, encountered some situation, or you have encountered some losses, encountered some adversaries, or even at the same time you have met with some success, it is only that logic that would help you to establish the reasons or the factors that have led you to this success. So this actually helps you to formulate your future course of action. Correct. So thus the logic, the clear cut link established between cause and effect by the logic actually would help a person to take decisions in future. Second thing is certain forecasts. So logic actually helps a person to do what if analysis and to predict the future. So an entrepreneur actually can certainly predict that by adding a few more machines his output can be increased, by hiring a few more sales personnel his sales can increase, by advertising in a few more places his sales can go up. Correct? So these things actually logic would help a person to come up with all these things. Then the last thing is logic helps strengthen one's conviction. See friends, I told you it is the intuition that helps a person to challenge the status quo and run ahead, right? But imagine a situation where your intuition is backed by scientific evidence, your intuition is backed by a logical basis. Then the conviction gets strengthened, a person becomes more confident, and a person would start moving ahead. Correct? So thus the logic actually has establishes cause effect relationship and helps a person to formulate decisions of about future. It they help you do what if analysis and helps you come up with the likely outcomes of every action. Then at the same time it offers enough scientific fodder to base one's decision so that his conviction gets strengthened. Now friends, we are convinced that both intuition and logic are important for any person to make visionary decision making. Once that is done, now it is important for us to analyze. See, because this topic essentially means that the word intersection is very important. The word intersection says that the visionary decision making happens when both intuition and logic talk to each other. Only when you base your decision both on intuition and logic together, then only you would be able to make a visionary decision, is what the statement is trying to argue. So now it is important for us to say, see, of course intuition is important. What happens if there is intuition, if the decision is based on intuition without logic? Correct? So the first one is overconfidence. Sometimes this is basically gut feeling. Intuition is a gut feeling. If you start doing something intuitively, if that intuition is not backed by sound logic, so many times the decision falters in so many times. Let us say a businessman is running furniture outlets. Okay, if his intuition says to establish, to set up a store in a particular place, the first thing he has to do is he has to do a market survey and he has to find out if persons living in and around that area or the persons who frequent that area have the requisite capacity, requisite capability, requisite financial stability to buy that furniture, or if they have the requisite inkling whether the persons who frequent that place have this taste and inclination to buy the furniture that are being sold by him. Correct? If without this market survey, if a store is merely located based on the intuition out of just overconfidence, what would happen? There would be no sales and the shop has to be closed down. Right? So it's not that simple. So then intuition is afflicted with self-bias. What do you mean by self-bias? By self-bias I mean, since intuition is my own opinion, right? So most of the times it is my own personality. Most of the times I get blinded by my own personal prejudices. Correct? So those personal prejudices have their own impact on my intuition. So thus most of the times my decision also becomes prejudicial. Correct? Next comes intuition is actually the intuition without logic most of the times blind a person to counterintuitive realities. What do you mean by counterintuitive realities? There are some realities that cannot be instinctively felt by anyone. The best example is Giffen's paradox. What do you mean by Giffen's paradox? The general intuition says when the product, when the prices of a product, prices of an item comes down, there would be more demand for it. See, this is intuition which anybody can say, okay. But what would Giffen's paradox say? So with regard to the products, substandard products, actually, as their prices come down, their demand also comes down, because inferior goods, the consumers try to substitute those inferior goods with superior goods, correct. So as the price of bread falls, people try to compensate the saving, I mean the reduction in the prices by buying more of cakes rather than bread. That is what Giffen paradox is. Is it not counterintuitive? If you are a businessman and if you simply get carried away by the intuition that by reducing prices the sales go up, then you tend to falter. So then that's how the counterintuitive realities get blinded by blinded if the decisions are exclusively based on intuition without logic. Now, once we have discussed about how decisions based merely on intuition without logic can go wrong, now it is important for us to discuss as to how decisions based purely on logic without having recourse to intuition can go wrong. Correct? The first and foremost thing is non-humanistic. See, basically, it is the logic is mostly based on non-human items. Correct? All this science, etc., physics, chemistry, whatever you talk about, mathematics and all, mostly works good with non-human beings or non-living things. Correct? But the human beings are such dynamic species where it is very difficult to predict their behaviors and to theorize their behaviors into logic. So that's why most of the times, if the decisions are based exclusively on logic without intuition, then most of those decisions are non-humanistic. Friends, as all of us are aware, visionary decision making bears fruits only if that decision making is accepted by all the individuals who would be impacted by the decision, or all those individuals who have to implement those decisions. Correct? So thus, if this does not work, if these people do not accept the decision, then they would implement it half-heartedly. If the persons who are impacted by the decision or don't accept that, then they would resist the decision. They would ensure that it doesn't get implemented. Correct? So, to give you the best example, let us say the logic says, if you make a person, let us say a person working for 6 hours is producing, let us say, 10 units. Correct? So your logic says that if the same person is made to work for 12 hours, then you should be able to make 20 units. Correct? But would that happen like that? Definitely no, right? Because as the person stretches himself beyond his capacity, then his productivity drops. Then finally, the output that he would churn out in the first 6 hours is definitely far higher than the output that he would churn out in the next 6 hours. So that's how human beings work. So if you don't have that intuitive ability to think, then you would actually falter. Your decisions don't become visionary, your decisions don't bear any fruits. The next thing is, two independent logics may not get synergized. Friends, let me illustrate. Logic 1. A person with higher grades has higher level of competence. Logic 2. Hiring persons with higher level of competence would lead to better performance of the company. Correct? These two are two independent logics. They hold good independently. But for me as a businessman, for my company to perform extraordinarily, I have to bring these two logics together. Correct? How do I bring these two logics together? I can bring these two logics together only with my intuition. How is that? A person with higher grades is more competent, is logic number 1. But For me, being a businessman, I know what competencies are required, what kind of persons I need. Then I would actually try to, my intuition would help me pick only those persons who are competent. That competence need not be linked to their academic performance. Friends, another example that both of us can relate is the personality test in the UPSC exam. See, in the absence of personality test, see, what is the logic? Logic says that a person who has scored higher marks in the mains is more, it tends to be more qualified to become a civil servant. Correct? But why is there personality test? This personality test is there to check, to check if the person with higher grade is really competent or not. That actually, that ability to check comes from intuition only. Everyone who takes UPSC civil services interview decides a person's capabilities only on the basis of the intuition, nothing on the logic. Correct? So thus, if there are two independent logics, how do you bring them together? You can bring them together only through intuition. Next, friends, logic without intuition can often be a limiting factor. I already told you, no friends, actually, because so many times logic itself limits one's thinking. Correct? Because that is established, everybody has agreed to it, everybody has said, okay, this is how it is. Can you go beyond that? Logic would not allow you to think beyond that, actually, because it's an established thing. So, thus, logic without intuition at times can be a big hurdle for visionary decision making. Then the last thing, friends, don't you think intuition has an element of conscience in its root? Because intuition springs from our personality, conscience also is essentially an important part of our personality. So thus, most of the times our intuition has its own is rooted in our conscience also. A person, so thus what I am trying to tell you is, intuitive decisions are more ethical because they are rooted in our voice of conscience, our inner voice. Correct? So we hear to our inner voice. Inner voice never allows us to do anything wrong, anything unethical. Thus intuition is mostly rooted in our conscience. Logic is not rooted in conscience. So the decisions based purely on logic can be unethical. Don't you think so, friends? Let us take the example of biotechnologist who comes up with some steroid, who invents some steroid to give immediate growth to children, leading to their breakdown in the long run. Correct? So I can trumpet my invention, I can mint money, okay, by selling that product, because the kid that drinks that supplement actually becomes stronger, taller, everything. But actually I can make money because nobody knows its side effects as of now, but in the long run those kids become the weak. Correct? But don't you think this is logic? Because being a businessman I have to make profit, being a scientist I have to market my invention. Clear? But would intuition permit you to do that? No, because intuition is based in conscience. Friends, now we have adequately argued that intuition without logic and logic without intuition do not serve any better purpose in visionary decision making. But now it is important for us to touch upon as to how both intuition and logic together can lead to visionary decision making. It is very simple, friends. Intuition helps a person to deal well with human beings, correct, with men. Similarly, logic helps a person to deal well with machines. Okay, any visionary decision making for any point of time actually is based on efficient management of men and machinery, material, whatever you call it. Okay, so if you manage men well, if you manage your money, materials, machines well, then you have become you have become a successful person. Correct? While intuition helps you manage human beings well, your logic helps you to manage non-human resources very well. Or to put it other way, human resources are better managed by intuition. The physical resources are better managed by logic. So thus, for any visionary decision making to bear fruits, it is important for us to efficiently manage both human and physical resources. So thus, you need both intuition as well as logic. Correct? So now friends, are intuition and logic enough? They may be enough, friends, but for a visionary decision making, intuition and logic are not enough. First and foremost thing is that you need aspiration, friends. You need aspiration. What do you mean by aspiration? See, for you, if you don't have that sense to make something big in life, then only you will make visionary decision making. Maybe you have the best intuition, maybe you are a logical person, but if you don't have that aspiration to do something great, something bigger, then visionary decision making can never happen. So thus the starting point for any visionary decision making is aspiration. In the absence of aspiration, intuition and logic become infructuous. They are not at all needed. Friends, the best example for this is the invention of ICs, integrated circuits. Correct? So the semiconductors were invented by Bradley and Britton, somebody. But they were pure researchers at heart. So they invented that. So they took Nobel Prize and they were happy with the invention. But it was William Shockley who was not merely happy with that invention. He wanted to commercialize it. He wanted to churn out uses from he wanted to churn out the functionalities from that invention, so that it would help him build a business, so that it would help society as a whole. That's how the Fairchild Semiconductors, the first semiconductor company in the world, was founded. Correct? So this aspiration is extremely important. Visionary decision making in the absence of aspiration would not take off at all. The second thing beyond intuition and logic are listening. What do you mean by listening? Friends, intuition and logic in most of the cases actually represent self. Correct? But actually a person to become successful has to listen to so many people, has to take inputs from so many people, has to incorporate the opinion, suggestions of so many people. So thus, to put it gently, beyond having one's own intuition and one's own logic are not adequate. A person visionary decision making needs others' intuitions, others' logics also. Correct? So thus, after all this analysis, it is time for conclusion, friends. Friends, from the above discussion, we can comfortably conclude that for the vehicle of visionary decision making to go ahead, to march ahead, both intuition and logic are the two wheels. However, for the vehicle to start, you need the ignition key, that is aspiration. And for this vehicle to go smooth, you need ball bearings, that are the opinions and intuitions of others, logics and intuitions of others. Friends, so thus visionary decision making actually happens at the intersection of four things: aspiration, intuition, logic, intuitions and logics of others. Okay, thank you, friends. Thanks for the patient hearing. All the best.